I'm going to pull my glasses off just for a moment here so that hopefully you can still, let me see what it just did here. No, continue. Okay. So that you can see my eyes, right? So I was a finance and accounting guy, heavy into ops. I ran an insurance company in Des Moines, Iowa. There was a leadership change back in 2006. I went in and I dropped in on a service bureau. I was the leader of that, and that thing went public. And whenever it did, or excuse me, it was a buyout, and all long-term incentives accelerated a couple of years later, and that was really nice. It was a turnaround opportunity, um, and so I stepped out, and I actually got into my first franchise at that point. So I bought a Renaissance Executive Forums coaching franchise, executive coaching franchise. I had 30 CEOs over about a 4-year period. In 2010, I completely stepped away. Um, and um, and then I bought SpeedPro. And to tell you the truth, I saw SpeedPro actually in like 2009. I saw it. I was looking at it for my son. I said to my son while I was coaching CEOs, I said, why don't we buy a business together and run it? He just graduated from college, 22-year-old guy. I mean, hey, why not, right? I mean, dad says, let's buy a business, run it together. Let's just do it, right? And so anyway, I looked at 9 going concerns. I'm also certified in business valuation. And so I looked at 9 going concerns, and some guy calls me and says, hey, would you be interested in looking at a large format graphics company? I said, this sounds a lot like Sign World. No. And he goes, this is a different animal. I want you to look at it. And I said, the startup? Yeah, it's a startup. And I said, no. And so the guy said, please, I was in Des Moines, Iowa at the time, please come and look at it. And I said, okay. So I went over and met Bruce Benson, a good friend of mine now in Des Moines. And he was the regional developer. And I said, sorry about kind of going on, but this is a story I think you need to kind of understand. I looked at it and I said, wow, what a great young guy's business, right? So that is a real trigger, right? And I said, wow, Derek, this looks like it'd be a great fit for you. Where's the territory? Omaha. His wife got a great job in Des Moines and he was not moving. Felt like his future was crushed. About a year later, I had one of the CEOs I was coaching. His business was going amazing. And he said, I'm going to stop coaching. I'm going to stop working with you. And I went, oh, shit. I told Denise, I said, now, I ran an insurance company. I ran a service bureau for Harlan Financial Solutions, and I've coached. I've never produced a real product. I said, I want you to go look at a business that I saw when Derek and I were looking at it a year ago. And we went and saw it. And she said, oh, what is it? Large format graphics. She said, sounds like Sign Solution or Sign World. She said, no, I'm not going to look at it. We went and looked at it. Whenever we walked through, Bruce said, did she walk through there with her arms crossed? She was not gonna like it. And she didn't say one word to Bruce, right? Bruce was talking, hey, here's what the customers are. This is a B2B, this is what we do. And these are the type of products we do. And Denise goes, she didn't hardly say a word. She was walking out the door and he goes, Denise, can you see yourself in the business? And she said, she turns back and she goes, I can. And I turned around to Bruce. I got my, hey, way to go. I just quietly walked out the door, So we started looking at Omaha, and I went over to, I was over there in the spring, or excuse me, in September of 2009. And this cold burst of wind came over my BMW at the time, and it hit me right in the face. And I went, holy shit. I sat right down in the machine and I said, I can open this thing anywhere. Where's the best city in America to open this thing? And so I started doing due diligence on it, and I figured out it was Omaha, or excuse me, it was either we looked at Omaha, but one of the other ones was Orlando. Frankly, I saw Orlando, Miami, I saw Vegas, but anyway, I said let's go do due diligence on Orlando, and so we did. And so I did due diligence on Orlando and on Omaha. And we quickly, we flew to Orlando. We talked to a lot of the vendors down there. We looked at sites possibly. We talked to the regional developer there. And that's where we kind of made our call. Two of our sons came with us. The one that was going to open in Omaha stayed in Des Moines. And so unfortunately we kind of split our family, but I went to Orlando to actually start this business, and not knowing a soul, didn't know. I knew one person in Orlando, right? And so I was heavy to, this was in 2010. We opened in May of 2010. I think our first full month was in June. And yeah, I can tell you about, so I'm a finance guy, finance and ops, right? So I can tell you about numbers, every revenue, by year, you know what I mean? But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Steve, did I throw up too much on the phone here?
No, Mike, that was perfect. And because I think, look, I think you captured, where you were in your life
Yeah.
and in your career.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people right now are on the call you're going through the same thing. So, you mentioned you looked at other opportunities. What was
Yep.
it about SpeedPro? And you kind of answered this, but I know what really intrigues me about the industry is it's B2B.
Yeah.
I've said this story to many of you. I mean, I had a general contractor in my house for 4 months, and I mean, he was dealing with my 3 young kids, my 2 dogs. We're cooking dinner, and he's in my house. Like that's kind of weird, But go ahead, Mike. Talk to us about what you looked at and what intrigued you about the industry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. When you think about Denise not wanting to do it, but then she started seeing the products, and she said, we've got corporate decorating, we've got all this cool stuff that we can do, right? And here's what, from my standpoint, I looked at it and I said, wow, we could do something. We can make a product. We can manufacture something, right? Here's the thing: of your revenue, your cost of goods sold is like 26 to 30% of your total cost. So you've got, I told Bruce Benson, I said, you know what, I got to tell you, I said, it makes me feel a little bit like an idiot. If a guy can't make a profit when you've got 70% gross margin, I mean, my last year, and I can kind of share what happened in 2022, but we had 36% net to owner, 36%, right? On 3.8 million in revenue. That is freaking, if it can't do that number, it's like we were north of $1.3 million, right? And so we were, for me, the money worked. For Denise, kind of the, kind of the artistic. Well, you think you got to be artistic, but I will tell you, I'm not an artistic guy at all. I'm very, very organized. I'm very logical in my thinking. So when they would walk up, we would see something like, hey, Mike, we want to hang something off this wall here and whatever. Denise would look at me and say, how do you think we could do it? Or, we want these banners hanging off the side of Orange County Convention Center. How would we do it? And so it was really interesting. And it just seemed like a good fit for us. So anyway, I think there's a little bit for everybody, right? There's a woman that worked, that was the franchisee down in Weston, Florida. And she was sales, very, designer savvy, right? So she did, it fit her really well too. So, I mean, it's funny, whether you're creative or whether you're logical or what, it can work, right? So anyway, I think you can find your love there.
Yeah. So, all right, you went down a lot of different paths there. Now, how did you learn, Mike? I mean, you didn't come into this with this background, and nobody on this call has large and wide format background experience. So how did you learn in, like, how long did it take? Because
great question. Yeah, great question. So, and this is what Bruce told me. I said to Bruce, I go, good Lord, I said, I don't know anything about this stuff. And he goes, Mike, in the first 6 months that we work together, you're going to learn he said, you're going to call me every day, probably 3 times a day. You're going to call me and say, a customer, and I'm really great at kind of sounding confident as I talk. And then what I would say to a customer whenever I first started, I'd say, wow, I said, I got a lot of ideas kind of flowing around in my head right now on how we want to attack this. But let me go back and let me just kind of narrow this down to a couple of things. And then I'll ping back to you. This was in the early days. And I would ping out to the network, man. And I had guys that would shoot me back, oh, great stuff, right? And just fast, boom, boom, boom. And that's the thing you're going to find is that is that, and I know, Steve, I'm tearing into another great element of this whole thing, right? But the network is so vital and such a huge asset, right? Because you have people like me now that saw everything, right? There was a guy named Steve Fernandez at the time, and Steve would ping within minutes on what, or I could call him and he would say, "Oh man, what a great one, Mike. Here's how I would attack this thing." But this is what Bruce said. Bruce said, in the first 6 months, you're going to learn 80% of everything you need to know about this business. In the next 6 months, and he goes, you're going to call me 3 times a day for the first month. That's going to go to 2 times a day, and then once a week, and then whatever, right? And he said, after 6 months, you're not going to call me that much anymore, right? And then he said, but then in the next 6 months, you're going to learn that another 10%, another 5% over the next probably another 6 months. And he goes, there's going to be 5% you'll never know, right? You'll always reach out to the network, or you'll research it a little bit. You know what I mean? I think that's probably, that may be a little strong or whatever, but there really was, and there were some cool things that customers, I loved the different things customers brought to me. Sometimes I wanted to take them on, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I outsourced them, sometimes we self-fulfilled, right? So there's some really neat things that you can do, sometimes in the network, sometimes on the network.
All right. So Mike, talk to us about customer acquisition. So 13 years ago was a little bit different than now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all, I mean, 20 years ago, we were still utilizing the yellow pages, but we're not doing that anymore. Now it's online, pay-per-click, it's networking events. But what did you guys do to grow your business from the beginning?
So we did a lot of, I had a marketing assistant that would reach out and kind of share the message about who we were and what we were doing, and then send a little trifold in the mail or something. Or I would swing by and drop it off. The owner would like to meet you and just kind of drop off something for you, and I would just drop off. It's funny, at the time I actually carried some really nice samples. We actually created a really nice, SpeedPro's got a really nice sample kit that you can walk in. You can walk in with anybody. I remember whenever I first showed that sample kit to a group that was, they were doing they were building an 11-story building. And the woman says to me, whenever I showed her that sample kit, she goes, "You're the guy, aren't you?" And I smiled and I said, "Yes, I am. Yes, ma'am." And so it was, you can share, you can talk about things. It's funny, the thing you'll find is you're the expert in the room no matter what, right? I mean, almost all right away, you're the expert in the room. You can share a little piece about, share some samples or something like that, and show some different things and kind of talk a story, and it just makes you the expert really quickly. So it's really, hopefully I answered your question there, but we had networking events we would go to. And again, we kind of turned into the printing guy. I didn't want to be known as the sign guy, if that makes sense, right? Because, but there's money in it. So if you want to do that, you can do it. You know what I mean? So but I did want to, I wanted to be, kind of that resource. I like to be in a knowledge source. What I found too was, whenever we first started, that a lot of the buyers for the customers were, and I would say, and don't be offended, anybody don't be offended, but I would say my buyers are 26 to 28-year-old young women that I can go in and I can kind of say, hey, they would shoot me an email and I'd say, okay, this is interesting, right? So here's some information about that. And I would write them 2 or 3 paragraphs in the early stages after talking to Steve Fernandez or somebody else. And they'd write back to me and they go, "Oh, Mike, thank you." So I was a resource for them, but man, it quickly got them. So they were like, "Man, I'm gonna buy from that guy because that guy helped me out." You know what I mean? And so anyway, it just kind of, and I learned that a little bit from coaching too, right? I mean, when I was a coach, people would say to me, they would say, "Hey, Mike, how would you handle this situation?" I'd say, "Oh, here's a great article on that." And I would just shoot it back to them. You know what I mean? They always say coaches really don't do much. They just kind of repeat. They regurgitate things back that you've already told them. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's really kind of interesting, So, okay.
All right. That was great, Mike. So talk to us about our competitive advantage. So I mean, you've mentioned signs before, Sign World. We obviously know there's Fast Signs, Sonorama. They're all out there. But what was it about SpeedPro first of all, what's our competitive advantage in the industry when you compare and contrast us?
Yeah, I would say that we're gonna know more about kind of um, different types of expertise. I mean, it's funny. In Orlando, I was never compared. I never went to bat against Fast Signs. Never. It's amazing, right? And whenever I went and saw them, I was like, wow, they've got a flatbed. They've got some of the products I do. But nobody now people compared me to the big animals there in Orlando, right? These guys had 15-foot printers. They were, yeah, I mean, they were like, oh, you're like Triangle, right? And whenever I'd go in, I'd say, who are you working with? And they would tell me, and I'd say, what do you like about Triangle? And they'd say, wow, great quality products. And I'd say, yeah, they're the only ones that can compete with us on quality. So for us, right, I think, Steve's looking for business people, right, that understand. We're not looking for graphic designers, right? I mean, you know, I apologize if somebody's a graphic designer, but I think you're looking for people that understand business. And so with me, speed, quality, really high level quality, right? I mean, when they would say to me, one of my customers said to me, he goes, whenever I took him on, he was like, they were really skeptical on whether or not we could actually produce at the speed that they were expecting, at the quality level they were expecting. And you know what? He said to me, he goes, I just send you the artwork. I don't even have to worry about going out and trying to source this anywhere else, because you'll have it done before they'll quote it. And I said, holy shit. I mean, that was so powerful when John told me that. And John's still my friend, right? He's still a customer after like 10 years. But we were so darn fast. And all of our processes are centered around making sure that product goes out of here uh, exactly the way that customer expects it, right? But just super fast, right? Now, from a pricing standpoint, guys, I was the highest priced. That's why if John found out that I was taking 36 cents of every dollar and putting it in my pocket, that would have pissed him off, I have to tell you, right? But I never told John. You know what I mean? John didn't have to know that, and he just knew I had. And the other part of it is my people were paid so well. I mean, they were paid so well. I mean, I had people, I lost the front of my house during COVID because people were paid $40,000 a year. These were my graphic design people that were the account managers, $40,000 a year, but they had bonuses that they'd make $65,000 a year because they had that 25 grand. And they started saying, Mike, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be an EMT. They saw all this stuff coming up during COVID. And I was like, oh, I told Denise, I said, I don't know where this is going to go. So I said, I can't jump into the fray right now. I'm lucky I'm keeping them on right now, but I lost the whole front of our house during that time. And so it was tough for us. Right. But, my production manager I think last year he made $142,000. Tell me that's not, whenever I told him, I said, hey, you've got to be the highest priced production manager in Orlando. He said, by far. He'd always say, by far. You know what I mean? And I was like, but I appreciate you. And he goes, I know you do. So it's the way it is. And the people who worked for him, they made a lot of money too. You know what I mean? So anyway.
All right, Mike,
I covered way too much stuff.
No, you're doing great, man. Let's
Okay.
talk about your single unit economics. Okay, so I know, Jeff, this will benefit you. So talk to us about like what you did, like your first couple of years,
Yeah.
in regards to sales.
Okay. So in my first, I started in June of 2010, and in like July or August, I actually got involved with a company that was doing. They would decorate the lobbies of hotels, and so I was lucky to be able to walk in on it. But they ended up turning a little bit of an anchor for me, and I'm always looking for those wholesale clients. If you looked at my customer base, you'd go, it's amazing that whenever I sold my company, I analyzed the customer retention, and something like 78% of my revenue was reoccurring year over year. I mean, that's amazing, right? So now all you're trying to reproduce is or regenerate is 22% of your revenue base, right? And so really that's pretty phenomenal. I started out the first 6 months of 2010 was I did 90,000. During that time, I bought a flatbed in March of 2011, and so you'll hear a little bit about roll to roll and flatbed and that kind of thing. But anyway, I bought that. The next calendar year, 2011, I did 500,000. I think it was 503 or something like that. The next year I did 710. The next year I did something like 840. The next year I did 920. In that next year, I lost my biggest customer, was 110,000 in the November of previous year. I replaced that revenue, plus I grew by about 70,000. I jumped to about 1.2 million. I jumped to 1.5, 1.9, 3 million, another 3 million the next year. COVID hit. I dropped down to 1.5 million. The next year we popped in 2021. We came back up. We were coming out of COVID. The first 6 months, we only did, I don't know, $500,000, but for the whole year of 2021, I did 1.9 million. 2022, we did 3.8 million. And so during the years, so here's the way it looks from a, you've got to know what your break even is. Okay. Remember me saying that for me, the last year, I was only 26% of my revenue dollar was for cost of goods sold. Okay. And so anytime I got over break even, 74% of every dollar over break even, my revenue break even, right, went into my pocket, right? And so think about this, and this number may scare everybody, but I had to do 170,000 in revenue to break even, okay, in 2022. And so when Denise and I did, 270,000, let's say, there was maybe a small incremental variable cost that went up a little bit, right? And there were bonuses that started to kick in and stuff, but not at 270, more in the 3 to 350 range or whatever. But we would make on that 100 grand, we'd make like 70,000 net go in our pocket. Make sense, right? Of that, anything over that number. During 2022, we had 3 months where we did over 400,000. The first one was in May of 2022, and Denise walks in and she goes, I just calculated the bonuses. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, the bonuses this month are going to be $35,000. She's had her hands on her hips. I said, close the door. And I said, now, honey, we're going to make, even after those bonuses are paid, we're going to make about $160,000 net. Don't you think those people out there, I really love the people we work with, right?
Yeah.
But
Hey,
the
Mike.
people out there deserve that number. You know what I mean? They deserve the 35,000. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no. Being an owner, I mean, that's part of, we spent like 2 days building a culture, around who you are. And so all of you are going to go in for the same training. It's business training, but it's building your own culture. And that's what Mike and Denise did such an amazing job doing. Hey, Mike, I know you like being at Mount Rushmore, traveling, but I also know you love the SpeedPro camaraderie and all that stuff. I do want to go back real quick.
Okay.
So when Mike talks about his break even being so high, I could not believe it when I walked into your studio. It's huge. So there's rent, there's, it's your cost of labor, it's your cost of goods. When you're producing $400,000, think about 30% of that is going to be cost of goods. And so there's a lot of those factors. I just want to point that out. I mean, but yeah, Mike, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, and so, yeah. And so when you start, right, let's talk about month number one. Whenever I first started, I did like, I don't know, something like 4,000 the first month, 6,000 the next month, 11,000 next month, 18,000. At 18,000 in my very fourth month, that was my break even. Okay. So the break even changes. I mean, when you get 11 or 12 people, of course your break even is going to go higher. Does that make sense? And so don't think you gotta have, 100, but you gotta have $18,000 to break even. That makes sense. And so, cause you're much smaller, right? I mean, when we ended, we were at 17,000 square feet. Like Steve said, I mean, and when we first started, we were at, 3,000 square feet or 3,500 square feet. Okay. Makes sense. And a couple of people, and so that's kind of how it grows. And like I said, my people made a lot of money. I mean, they were very well paid. So anyway.
All right. So
Well,
I want to start asking you all, if you have questions, type them in. But so just start thinking about that. But Mike, I want to ask you, because I remember the last time I asked you this, what could you have done differently? And I want to tell everybody a story real quick. So I was in a studio in San Francisco, the East Bay studio, Mike. So that's oh geez, I forget their names. But so when they started out, I asked them, like, what would you have done differently? And they said they would have paid their people a little bit more. And that would have helped retain them, because they felt like they were losing people in the very beginning. And Mike, you really hit it on the head, like paying your people well, because you're not just up against this industry. Mike just said you were up against teacher salaries, EMT salaries. I
yeah.
mean, let's face it, there's a lot of other jobs out there, a lot of opportunities out there. So, but what would you have done differently, Mike, if you could do it all over again?
Gosh, I don't know. I did everything right. No, there's a lot of things. It's funny, guys. When you come out, I wish I would have. My mentor was great with. I'm a finance guy, guys. Okay, and so he taught me how to love people, right? But it's interesting when you're running a company, you're working with directors and you're working with vice presidents. Those are the people reporting to you. You know, it's easy to love those people, right? But when you have a person that's on the table cutting apart decals and they do it wrong and they cut through something, or they slow down because they're trying to piss you off. I think sometimes, almost, right? It's tough. It's tough, right? And but I will tell you that I found that I disrespected a um, a Latino man. He was about my age, and I said to him a couple of times. I said, "Look, the customer's here. I got to get that stuff cut up. Move out of the way and let me cut it, right?" Because he'd almost slow down whenever. But disrespecting him, but the rest of my team saw it. You know what I mean? And just you have to show, and that's why I say everything. So I started watching people in the South, right? And they'd say, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir." And I'd say to my team, I called him, I said, "Hey, sir, can you tell me uh, when are we going to have that? When will we have that done?" Right? I have a gentleman out front. Just treat everybody with so much respect. Overkill it, right? And people will love you for it. It definitely was a huge mistake on my part, and I learned it. I transitioned pretty fast on it, right? Because I was watching, I was sitting there thinking, man, that is, and now it doesn't matter. And it didn't matter if people were delivering stuff for me from a vendor. I'd say, "Hey, sir," I said, "can I help you with that?" I'd carry stuff in. It didn't matter, right? I'd be on site sometimes at midnight out at Kennedy Space Center, and part of it because I loved it. Or I'd be at Daytona Speedway because I'd be like, man, you walk into Daytona Speedway at nighttime, or you walk in there in the afternoon when they're oh, it's just cool, right? It's just cool. And so, well, I wasn't there every day, but yeah, just showing people how much you care for them. It was something it just brought everything back from my mentor. You know what I mean? So that's the big one right there. Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably the big one.
Hey, Mike, I got a question here. So would you
Yes, sir.
attribute your growth? So when you're at 900 and your trajectory that you went through to get to 900,000, I feel like that's pretty, yes, it's a little bit above average, but it's what we expect. And I feel like at 900, that's when people pump the brakes or they hit the gas pedal. Now you hit the gas pedal, and how did you get to almost $4 million
Yeah.
Was it equipment? Was it staff? Was it, hey, you figured this thing out? What was that?
So I continued. So a couple things. One is I'm a ferocious learner, right? But I had a guy down in Miami who was not a speed pro. He owned his own large format company, and he was 10 years ahead of me. And so he said to me, he goes, you, and we became friends. And so I'd walk in there and I'd say, okay, Hilberto, I said, okay, here's some things I've noticed from you. I've noticed that you know, your team isn't running right. He loved talking to me because I talked differently than almost anybody else. And he'd say, oh, Michael, come down and see what I'm doing, and I would. But I would say to him, I'd say, so what are you seeing? Where are we going in the market? What are we doing? And he said to me, we're going into fabric. There's a lot more fabric being produced and things like that. And you produce fabric with a smaller machine. We ended up buying a 10-foot wide machine. You don't have to. But he said there's a lot of stuff with fabric that I think is a huge, I think it's a direction, especially for my market. So I went out, I came back and I said, well, I'm never going to do fabric, but I just, I appreciate it. Thanks for showing me where you're headed and stuff. And I gave him, my observations about his business. And he was, he loved it. So I came back and I went out and I talked to my customers, and I kept looking at my customers saying, how, where are you spending your money, and how can I get some of that wallet share? I didn't say that to him, but that was my strategy. And all of a sudden I found out from my top customers, and there was probably 15 of them in there, they were spending $440,000 a year in fabric for out of state production. And I went, holy sheesh. I mean, man, can I learn about fabric? And I did, right? So anytime somebody came in and took a tour of our facility, I would almost always win that business. I can only think of a couple of customers that I did not win that business. And one of the people said to me one time, they said, our owners make us send out get three quotes from competitors before we place the business. And I can't place any business with you because you're the highest priced every time. But what I told the owner was, we can either do this with somebody else twice, or we can do it with SpeedPro once. And I took that as a huge compliment. And I said, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I never brought my price down. I never won that business from him because I wasn't going to do their business for a lot cheaper. I sat there and thought, you can just go bury somebody else, because they had a lot of business. And I just thought, hey, whatever, right? But I think that's the big thing. The other thing I would say too is that, so the other thing we did too was, like, I started bringing on, I was a big one with I wanted redundant equipment. And so as I got bigger, like I had 2 flatbeds. I ended up, when I left, I had 3 flatbeds, right? I had 2 fabric printers because we were doing, whenever I left, we were doing 1.6 million in fabric a year. And so I wanted to make sure there was redundancy there so that we wouldn't let our customers down, and our customers knew it. And I would say to them, I'd say, we've got this redundancy sitting here because we want to protect you. If we protect you, we're going to protect your bottom line and my bottom line, right? And they were like, absolutely, right? And so that was probably some of the things we did. Hopefully I answered that question, Steve.
Yeah, Mike, that was great. And I do want to point something out. You did something that was really smart. You bought the equipment after knowing your market and your customer.
Right.
I do want to point that out. I've seen a lot of folks buy equipment and they don't have a customers for it. And now you got a $250,000 piece of equipment that's sitting there doing nothing. And this isn't a sports car. This is supposed to produce every day. They're meant to run all day and every day.
In fact, during COVID, when they sat there, it caused them problems. They'd rather run, 11 or 12 hours a day, and they run like a Ferrari. But when they sit there for, 23 hours a day, oh my God, now you've got, head problems. You've got, you're messing around with it a little bit. You know what I mean? So yeah. So they, oh man, when we were running hard, they were great. And think about this too, of all of our team, I just told you 11 or 12 people. I had 3 people producing 3.8 million in revenue. Now I outsourced of that revenue that last year, maybe 200,000, maybe, probably probably not quite that much, but so I had 3 people producing all that. I had 2 additional people that did sewing for me, okay? But the 3 people they would print it, they would have it cut and ready to go, either ship it out or ready for sewing and stuff, right? I had 3 people in the front of the house, 3 or 4 people, 3.5 people in the front of the house, and they were graphic designers. And but what they would do is I made the front of my house responsible for it. And you can set the business up. Sorry, I was a fly. You can set the business up so however you want it to run. But there'd be 3 or 4 people that would take in the artwork, and they would prep the artwork and make sure it looked like it was ready to go. And then they would kick it to my production team, and then the production team, then they would print it. If my production team saw something, they'd say, hey, they kick it back to the account managers, I would call them. And the account managers then they'd say, I need a new image. This thing doesn't work. Okay. And then we had, Denise and I involved there. I had a couple of installers that would go out and actually, they would hang something. Most of it was installing vinyl on floors and walls. You know what I mean? Simple stuff, right? Some vehicle wraps. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that, Steve.
Yep.
I just wanted to kind of describe what those people look like,
No, and it's interesting because like a Chick-fil-A does $3 million on average, right? And they have 60 to 80 people working for them. Yeah. And you had 12 people total, really.
12.
I mean, it's pretty fascinating.
Well, and when you start going in and looking at other sign companies, right? You're going to look at other sign companies. You're going to go, they're going to have 25 people doing if you do 3 million, right? It's a big difference, right? And the other thing I would say too, and what Steve was talking about, before COVID, our average tenure was probably 5 years. So, and in Orlando, people are very transient in that community, right? So they were kind of in and out. We saw that in the first couple of years. And all of a sudden I was like, man, I told Denise, I said, we're going to pay them well. We're going to love them to death. And we're going to see if we can get them to hang with us, right? And they did. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden I started losing some people. I hated it. But, they still, they'd come back and see us and that kind of thing. We love the relationships and stuff, but it was key to keep a hold of those folks, the good people that you have. You know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. So, I got 3 questions, and then we're going to get to the good stuff and talk about retirement.
Oh, sheesh. Okay.
What are some types of marketing you tried that produced positive returns? So, and I don't want to answer this for you, Mike, but we talked about networking. We talked about online pay-per-click. Those are the 2 main mechanisms that's going to drive traffic when you're in customer acquisition mode, but then you're going to get referrals. Every project you do, every owner of a business or decision maker is going to help sell and become a referral. So go ahead, Mike. I'll let you answer, but I didn't mean to answer that for you.
Yeah. So yeah, you hit on it. But so probably most recently, SEO and PPC have really delivered a lot for us. So there's a franchise called Tijuana Flats, right? It's a Mexican place, and so we did a lot of. So I got them through online, right? And we really started putting a lot more effort into our online, and it really started paying off. So I mean, really started getting a lot more stuff there. The referrals were really big in the early years because I had one customer. Some customers, they're really interesting. Some customers would say, "You're my secret weapon. I'm not going to share your information with anybody." And what I would tell them is, I'd say, "Look, you want me to be strong. You want me to be a powerful partner, right? And for me to be a powerful partner, I need business." And so they would go, "Yeah, no, I get it." And so, but I had other customers that John I was talking about. John gave my name to everybody, which was fabulous. I loved him. And so still do. He's a really good friend of mine. And so he wanted me to be successful. And so, and I still took 36 cents of every dollar from him, yeah, probably now, right now it's online PPC, networking events. Sometimes just, we would actually, so I actually hired a guy from my, he was a vendor of mine, and he got me into something called target analysis. And we would look at, here are the products we want to produce, which is really great, right? Here's the type of customers that would need our products. And we'd create a list and we'd say, that's our hit list. let's go after those people. Let's knock them out. And so that's what we would do. We would really highly target people that we wanted to work with. And it's called a target analysis and stuff. I tied a product analysis with a target analysis because he was just kind of wildly going after target analysis. And I said, hang on, bro. I only want people that I want to produce the products, because at the end of the day, guys, here's the deal. I wanted to make sure after 12 years or whatever, I wanted to produce the products I wanted to produce, not the products my customers wanted me to produce. That makes sense? And so I was very regimented into when somebody'd say, hey, can you do a monument sign for me? You know, I could, but let me send you over to a partner company that we would recommend you working with. And sometimes you could, if you want to take a referral fee from them, you can. If not, I would just say, I just be a good partner, and I'd send them over. So, but I did not want to do that because I messed around with the permitting process, and I was like, holy crap, I do not want to do that every day. Okay, go ahead, Steve. What else?
Well, yeah, you're totally right. All right. So you've been in this industry for 13 years ish. You've seen the technology change from, eco-solvent, well, probably solvent to eco-solvent to, to latex, and, the flatbeds and the different technology there, the fabric printers. What technology are you aware of now, potentially where this business could go? Now, I don't want you don't have to talk about digital signage. You don't have to talk about maybe 3D printers, but what do you see, Mike?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's, I kept trying to figure out if print was going to be dead. This was 5 years ago, and I kept looking out. I told my long-term strategy, my view for a long-term strategy was always 5 years. And I would look out that 5-year horizon, and it kept going, I don't see it. I don't see it going away, right? And I still don't see it going away. Do I see that there's movement towards digital, but there still has to be content development on it. It's so much easier to do print production than it is to do, significant content development on digital, right? It's funny, I've seen eco-solvent, which is something we thought was dead years ago, come back through the Epsons, and they print really nice. They have really nice products and things like that. So I love it. The one thing that we found was with the eco-solvents that they ended up doing stuff with, where there was faster curing and that kind of thing with those things. So I think that's kind of cool. I just think that technology is getting better and better, and I still feel the need for I still see the need for the print media that we have, So I don't know. I may not be able to see the future like I should, but that's what I see now. But anyway,
I also think partnering with a franchise, we have people at the industry specific trade shows, and we always introduce and bring the different vendors to the annual convention. All right, I got two more things. So,
okay.
It's a good question. All right, how did you come across as confident, maybe in the beginning and towards the end of your tenure with SpeedPro as an owner, of standing firm on your pricing? Because my knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people when they start out, even as a new or a resale, is I want to win that business, so I'm going to discount it, and then it's very hard to come up.
Yeah. So when I would go in, I like talking to customers. I like talking to the owners of businesses, right? So if you go into an agency, you want to talk to the owner, right? But I would say, I'd say something like this. I would say, in 2010, I was really great about going in and saying, so tell me about your business. What happened during 2008 in Orlando? The market went boom in 2008, right? Just hit the ground. And I'd say, how'd you come out of it? How'd you climb out of that? What did that look like? Where are you at today versus where you were in 2007 or 2006? And they'd start talking about themselves, right? Which I found out with CEOs that, they love talking about themselves, right? And just like I do, right? You're seeing me talk about myself. They're really comfortable with it. During that time, I'd say, who are you working with large format graphics? And they'd say, everybody was talking about triangle reprographics, we work with Triangle, we work with Color Reflections, and I would say, what do you like about working with Triangle Reprographics? And they would say, I love the quality of what they do, man. They really have great quality. And I'd say, I just kind of nod my head and I'd say, yeah, they're the only ones that compare to us in the marketplace. So that I just now put myself at the same level as Triangle, tried to anyway. And then I would say, if they gave me 3 or 4 things that they liked about them, I'd say, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to pull these guys. But instead, I'd say, what would you change if you could? What could Triangle do a little differently for you? And they'd say, well, they could quote a little bit faster. And I kind of nod my head. And they would go, but I never talked them down, never. Tell me, and they would say, and they don't deliver their product very quickly, right? So good quality, no speed, and they're really high priced. And I'd say, I just kind of nod my head and say, well, let me tell you about our standard performance. We quote in 45 minutes. And why I selected 45 minutes, it was less than an hour. And I just thought, what the heck, right? And I did, I quote, our team quotes fast, right? I would say to the gang, I would say, if we get an email, I want to respond in 15 minutes that we're on it, okay? And so just something back to the customer or a prospect. I would say our standard performance. I would say we quote in 45 minutes. We deliver in 24 hours, and we're 20% less than Triangle. Now, I never knew what Triangle was, how much their price was, right? But I tried to, you know, and again, SpeedPro taught me how to price, right? But I was like, okay. And then I eventually brought my prices up. My prices were probably 15% lower than they were after I really started getting more business, right? Started getting business, and I would just slowly bring it up on customers, and they expected prices to go up. And during that time, it's really amazing. Most vendors were not raising prices, and also my cost of goods sold were not going up, right? My cost of goods sold seemed like they were. I was finding new ways to produce things and that kind of thing. I apologize. See all the little children that are running around down here in the amphitheater now.
No, that's great.
I think, yeah. But anyway, that's kind of, hopefully I answer your question, guys. If there's ever any thing, Steve can give you my information, and give me a call or write me an email if you didn't get your question answered on this kind of thing. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
hey, Mike, I want you to sign off now, but tell us where you are, how long, you know, since you've sold your business, and
Yep.
And we'll
yeah. So I went through the process of selling my business. I'm gonna give you a little bit of story on that. We looked at Denise and I looked at the business, and we said, okay, if we could get, you know, X amount for the business, I mean, let's do it, right? And so we pulled out about $3 million out of the business 5 months ago. The sales process was great. Actually, SpeedPro locked me into a broker. Now, everybody that knows anything about selling a business, the broker fee was $20,000. $20,000 on a $3 million sale, right? So there you go. And so I felt really great about that, right? Because everybody and I thought I was going to have to hook into I'm going to start walking up because the children are kind of having fun here. Yeah, and so that was 5 months ago. I brought in the actual business sold in April. When it sold, then we did a training on them. And that took about 3 weeks or so. And again, we had all of our management in place, right? I've got, but you know, Denise and I weren't there anymore. So our management has continued to kind of reach out to us every once in a while. The owners have not that much. Being an RD, I go in and I see them, and if anybody reaches out to us, we just go ahead and we write them back, or we make a phone call, and we just kind of tell them what our thoughts are and stuff, you know. But the business continued to flow, and so that is what, yeah. During 2019, I really wasn't in the business that much, right? I was really planning on kind of letting the business transition to a 3-person management team. During COVID, as I said, I lost my salesperson. And so because of that, and during COVID, I stepped back in the business and I had to start running it, you know what I mean? And so, but my profitability was really high. When I got back in and really got my hands into it and changed my pricing and got ahead of some of the the jumped up pricing that was happening with the cost of goods sold and stuff. I really got ahead of it. I saw it coming, and so I you know, and SpeedPro was great about saying, here's what we're hearing from the vendors. Here's this, here's that, here's that. And I was like, boom. When they tell me there was an 8% price increase coming from 3M, boom, my prices go right up. You know what I mean? And that was it. I mean, here's the thing with your inventories though. I was going to say I may have inventory on the floor that was less than that. You don't have to have much inventory on the floor. For years, I mean, when we were doing 3 million in revenue, when I left, my inventory was like 76,000. Okay. That was the items on the floor. But before that, it was probably more like 25 or 30,000. Now think you're producing 3 million. It was all just in time delivery of goods. It was, guys, this is a great business. It's really a great business. I mean, you don't have to produce 3 million. You don't have to have $300,000 sitting in inventory. I mean, it's amazing. You're calling, hey, we need this stuff delivered this morning, or I'm sending a truck over to have it picked up. And I had a Sprinter truck, and they would go over and they'd pick it up, and boom, we'd have that stuff back, and we'd be printing, and the stuff go out that night. It was nuts. But anyway, you know, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah.
Please,
Any final words, Mike? And where are you at right now? I know you mentioned it when you first called in, but where are you at? Any final words?
Yeah, I've got, so I'm sitting in Mount Rushmore. I think everybody saw the faces behind me. Hopefully they did. What a beautiful setting, right? And so we are, I probably would have been here if COVID hadn't hit. I would have been here anyway. But my business would have still been producing $1 million a year for me. You know what I mean? So, but instead Denise and I, as COVID came back, here's what happened with us. And just to be completely honest, hey. To be completely honest with you, when we came back, we actually, this is my wife, Denise. When we came back, we did not have the front of our house. Remember me telling you that, right? And so in December of 2021, as it was coming back hard, I told Denise, I said, and we were working really hard. You know, I mean, we were producing, you know, 350, and there wasn't a lot of people in the front writing quotes and that kind of thing. And so I told her, I said, let me bring the people on. I promise you, I know what this is supposed to look like, and we'll get this thing sold. And that's when we started to really set it up for sale, right? And so we took it to the market, and we sold it, you know, about 16 months later. But it was something that it was great to own, because it was running on its own. You know what I mean? And we just loved it. But after we experienced the COVID thing, just shook everything up, guys. And I know you guys are like the same way. Probably you're like, man, it just turned everything upside down, you know. But we're super happy that we sold. The owners are great. They're loving the business, and yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of off to the races here, you know. So it's good. So if there's ever anything you guys need, I know Steve can have you reach out to me or whatever. And if you want to talk about some things, apologize for getting long-winded, but Steve knew that. He was like, I know he's going to overtalk.
I knew what I signed up for. It was great, Mike.
Yeah. Well, I just try to be authentic and tell you where I'm at. Right. And so just understand, I love the business, still love the business, but we just, you know, Denise and I really took it out of us at the end of 2021, you know, and so that was we were really loving it before that, but anyway, just got very daunting, you know. So all right, guys.
Mike, thank you very much. Yep, and everybody, thank you. If you have any other questions, let me know. Jeff, I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.